Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
I'm glad you went on there because it gave me a chance to do some research while you were talking. And I didn't hear a word you said, which is fine.
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
I'm Josh in Toronto.
And I'm Skip in Montreal.
In today's episode, some TV notes.
More Expos on TV.
And my first ever TV appearance.
But first, the Kentucky Derby.
Okay, Skip, so today is your favorite day of the year.
May 2nd?
If you don't know, then maybe it's not your favorite day of the year.
How come?
Well,
I don't know. I really don't know why.
Okay, it's supposed to be the Kentucky Derby today.
Oh my God. Today is Kentucky Derby Day. I completely forgot. And I actually had a note about that a long time ago because the Kentucky Derby was like one of the first things to get canceled.
Was it really?
Well, like a long time ago. Well, like when the NBA canceled their season, you know, like Rudy Gobert and all that, at one point all the horse races sort of changed their schedule. And I remember reading about how the Kentucky Derby may happen, but it's not going to happen in May like it usually does. That's too bad. I would have loved to watch that today.
I mean, the whole thing lasts, 90 seconds, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 minutes. It's a 4-hour pre-show and a 2-minute race.
I wonder...
only in America.
If like, people have to social distance, but do animals have to social distance?
I don't know. You know, we're going to get into Science Corner now, but at first I heard that it's not possible for the animals to get COVID-19. And again, I hate this because I don't want to turn this into the COVID-19 show, but I did hear that it's not possible for animals to get it. But then I read in the news that there's a dog that had it. So I don't really quite understand.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because maybe the horses could run the race without the jockeys on the horse. So you could still do the race just without any jockeys.
I think that's probably the way it should have been in the beginning anyways. They just added people on, the jockeys just to make it interesting.
I think it would be better without jockeys.
I always feel like when I watch horse racing that, like, if you go back to like the original horse race, it's like some guy was like, okay, so they used to race the horses to see whose were faster, right? And then some guy in like 1600 was like, you know what we should do? We should put people on the horses to see if they could stay on. Not to see, like, not to ride them, just to see if they could stay on, you know? You never know, like, the origin of this stuff. Oh my God, what a tangent we just went off on the first minute here.
Major League Baseball.
So, by the way, today is also an anniversary.
Uh-huh.
And we did mention this on our last episode. It's the anniversary of Tim Raines' first game of the 1987 season where he hit a grand slam against the Mets in extra innings to win the game.
Right. That game, I think, is on TSN tomorrow.
That's correct.
Right?
It is.
Sunday night. I like searched through the guide to see what was what.
Raines has 2 singles, a triple, a walk, a stolen base. He has scored twice, and the only time they got him was a dazzling play by Tim Tuffle. What a day he's had. High drive into deep left field. McReynolds watching. Would you believe a grand slam for Tim Raines? That has to be one of the most incredible stories of the year in any sport. The first day back.
So speaking of Expos games that are coming up on
there's more?
Well, yeah, there's more. On Tuesday.
Thank God I have you to tell me this stuff.
Yeah, well, this is all I do. I search the guide for Expos games.
Oh God.
And by the way, so I don't know how it works with Videotron, but when you search with Bell Fibe, you can type in, like, I type in Expos, right?
Oh.
Like, I'm not going to type in baseball because too much is going to come up.
Right.
But Expos is not something that would come up at all normally. But when you only type in Expos, it shows you, like, anything that has the word Expos in it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that came up on my guide was college babes exposed.
It's perfect. It's the perfect search. What can I tell you?
So anyway, but getting back to baseball.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, which is, I believe, Cinco de Mayo, they're showing an Expos game from September 27th, 1998. I don't think you're going to guess what happened in that game.
98. No, I have no idea.
So you're not going to guess because they're showing it had nothing to do with the Expos. Just so happened they played in the game, but it was Mark McGuire's 70th home run.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So that you can watch on Tuesday.
Okay.
But I did want to talk about a couple of Expos games that I watched this past week.
Right. As you know, I watched that Reggie Sanders game.
Well, you watched it live. I didn't. Like, you watched it in 1994 when it actually happened.
I did, yes. I sent you the picture of me watching it that I talked about last week, and I will post it on our website. I scavenged through all my old photos and did find the picture. It's quite amazing, actually.
I was disappointed that the broadcast they showed us was the Cincinnati Reds broadcast. It wasn't Dave Van Horn.
It was absurd. I can't even believe like that's what it was. I turned this on and I was like, what?
Well,
what? We got a Reds broadcast? What is this?
So, TSN gets this stuff from ESPN Classic.
Right.
And so when ESPN does these classic games, they probably very rarely use Dave Van Horn's call.
Right. They just get what they can.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, obviously Pedro pitched great, but I don't remember anything about this game.
Right.
And so I was stunned. I watched the whole thing. I was stunned. Darren Fletcher went 4 for 4, first of all. That never happens.
Yeah. Well, you have a low opinion of Darren Fletcher.
Okay, but still, how often did he go 4 for 4 with 2 home runs?
Never. Probably that's the only time. But I always feel like whenever we talk, you always. I think Darren Fletcher was a better player than you think.
That's fair. I guess I'm comparing him to the really good Gary Carter years.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was never going to be that, but he was a good major league catcher.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Except that he went 4 for 4 with 2 home runs and a bunt single.
A bunt single was classic. It was beautiful.
In the history of baseball, I'm curious to know how many players, catchers or otherwise, went 4 for 4 with 2 home runs and a bunt single in the same game.
See, this is the kind of thing that is like almost impossible to find out.
Oh, I'm sure somebody knows.
I don't know how you could find out. I'm actually gonna throw this out on Twitter maybe later today and see if like people could know this. Like he might be the only one. You're absolutely right.
Because guys who hit home runs don't bunt, and guys who bunt don't hit home runs.
That's right.
And catchers don't do anything.
That's right. So I have some thoughts about the game, but I'll let you continue.
No, go ahead, because I want to talk about a different game that I saw this week. But
well, so first of all, Jeff Gardner led off for the Expos.
The lineup was so strange that game.
Yeah, so I pride myself on really remembering that 94 season like so well, and I know the team sort of inside out, but I almost have no recollection of Jeff Gardner. And I guess it's because this is a very early season game, right? This is April 13th. We're only 2 weeks into the season.
Right.
And I think Felipe was still figuring out what he was going to do with the lineup, We didn't see Sean Barry we talked about Sean Barry. Felipe had a knack of using him in better situations where he was going to excel. But there's 2 guys on that 94 team that eventually took Jeff Gardner's playing time, which are Freddie Benavides and Juan Bell. And if you remember the 94 season, those guys were important. Like you if you just put in the lineup, you're going to say Lansing was at second, Barry was at third.
Lansing didn't play that game, by the way.
I know, because but Benavides and Juan Bell made a significant contribution that season, right? And because he would rotate all these guys in and out of the lineup. So I feel like Jeff Gardner got squeezed out by those guys eventually. And the other thing that was interesting is that, Moises Alou was in left, and the announcers made a point of saying it was only the first time this season that he was playing in back-to-back games. And as you know, and as you remember, like he had that ridiculous, disgusting, I can't even think about it, ankle injury at the end of the 93 season against the Cardinals, where, I mean, people thought his career was over. So it's pretty incredible to just think back, like what a career he had after 94, like even after he left the Expos. This guy was still a star on Florida, Chicago, like Houston, like he had like a huge career after, So, I mean, it's just interesting to see like that game sort of in the little bubble in time that it was, early April game,
So we might end up talking about this game for like an hour because there's so many things I just thought of now.
Okay.
First of all, I'd never heard of Jeff Gardner. That's number one. Number two,
Well, that's it. I barely remember him.
How often does a third baseman bat leadoff?
Exactly, yeah.
So that's the other thing. The other thing I was
I think eventually Grissom settled into the leadoff spot, but...
Well, on that roster, like the only logical leadoff hitter after they traded Delino, the only logical leadoff hitter was Grissom.
To me, the lineup that I remember from the 94 was Grissom, Floyd, right?
I think so.
Alou, Walker, Fletcher, Cordero. And then that's the lineup I remember.
I think you're right. But I mean, it was just that game, neither Lansing nor Sean Barry started, which was odd.
Right.
And
anyways, it's awesome. But back to the Reds announcers. So just so everybody knows what we're talking about.
Hold on.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about them too, but
yeah.
We have to go down a rabbit hole right now.
I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
Oh no.
So I was thinking about this. Just before that season, in the offseason, that's when they traded Delino for Pedro.
Yes, it is.
So I'm thinking about it. And I don't know if you remember, the 94 roster, Rondell White was on the roster. He hardly played, but he was on the roster.
Yeah.
So think about this for a minute. You're the general manager of the Expos. You want to acquire Pedro Martinez. It's the offseason. And you call up the Dodgers and you're like, I want to acquire Pedro Martinez. Now, of course, they're going to want one of the,
young players that we had.
Right. So there was Delino, there was Grissom, there was Walker, there was Alou. I'm forgetting some guys.
Yeah.
And they ended up trading Delino, ended up working out. But think about this for a minute. What if instead of Delino, they had traded Grissom? And the reason I'm saying this is because Delino could have stayed at second. Lansing could have stayed at third. The infield would have been super solid. And Rondell could have played center field instead of Grissom.
Yeah.
I think
we wouldn't have been as good.
I think the team would actually have been better.
No, because Rondell White wasn't. Don't forget, Grissom was already going into his third season. He was ready.
True. I just think that they had more depth in the outfield. They could have afforded to trade an outfielder.
But I imagine that the Dodgers wanted Delino. They probably asked for him.
That I don't know. Anyway, what were you going to say about the Reds broadcasters?
Well, I mean, just to set the scene so people know what the hell we're talking about. Pedro had a perfect game into the 8th inning. Actually, there was one out already in the 8th inning, and he had 2 strikes on Reggie Sanders. So he's 1 strike away from, he's 4 outs away plus a strike from a perfect game, right? And then what ends up happening is he hits Reggie Sanders. Now, keep in mind, and I watched the whole game, he buzzed Sanders twice inside. And the first time, which was in the 2nd inning, Sanders started walking to the mound, took 1 step towards the mound, hey, he was pissed. Second time, Pedro came inside again a few innings later, and then eventually he hit him. But so he hits him. Perfect game's over. Pedro's not even looking at Reggie Sanders. He's looking up in the air, and he's basically sort of making this face ugh, I just blew my perfect game, on this stupid hit. He was annoyed with himself. And then meanwhile, Reggie Sanders is coming up to beat the hell out of him, right? And the Reds announcers never once in the whole melee of the fight, and the bench is empty and everything, they never once say he was pitching a perfect game. They never use the word perfect game. They say he was dominant. He was pitching a gem. He was on top of his game. He had his great stuff. Why don't you say exactly what was actually happening? And that, because they were trying to defend Lou Piniella, and Pinella's arguing, he was the manager of the Reds, he's arguing, and they wanted Pedro thrown out of the game and all this, but why don't you call it like it is, at the time, and say he was pitching a perfect game? Why? Because if you say that, you realize how stupid it was for Reggie Sanders to charge the mound. That's the whole thing.
So I had a different take.
Okay.
I mean, everything you said is accurate, but so in addition to, he did hit Sanders, and he almost hit Sanders twice before. There was another player on the Reds that he almost hit earlier in the game. I forget his name. And so the Reds were already pissed at Pedro.
Oh yeah, they were.
And so I'm sure he didn't hit him on purpose, obviously. But what I was impressed with, because you know how I always rail on opposing play-by-play guys, that they're always homers and they always root for their own team. I was actually impressed that I thought, okay, we're watching the Reds broadcast, and this is before the whole melee even started, and I'm thinking, oh, great. Now the Reds broadcasters are going to be so pro Cincinnati, and
they were pretty even.
They were actually quite even. Like, they didn't say, he hit him on purpose, whatever. Like, they didn't say that, and I was impressed that they were as neutral as they were, to be honest.
The other player I think that he almost hit was Kevin Mitchell, I think.
I thought it was a left-handed hitter.
Oh, maybe. Anyways, but Kevin Mitchell looks incredibly fat. I couldn't believe how fat he was.
Oh, he gained a lot of weight there.
It was I when I was watching the game, I was like, man, who the hell is that? Like, he's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing about that game, Tony Fernandez was playing second for the Reds.
He is so good defensively.
He made some plays that he makes them look so easy. Like, oh my God. It's amazing because like we know a lot of Jays fans, the two of us, and Tony Fernandez is a huge fan favorite among many Jays fans, right? Because he was like one of their first real stars, and you just forget like what a great player he was, so.
It's interesting because like Tony Fernandez, was a shortstop his entire career, and they had to move him over to second. Yeah. So I mean, if you got like Tony Fernandez, a Gold Glove shortstop playing second base, obviously he's going to be good at second base.
Yeah. Well, truthfully, I think Tony Fernandez was probably better defensively at the time than Barry Larkin.
Yes.
Like, he probably was better, but it's just like they're not going to ask Barry Larkin to change positions. They're just not.
It's like Derek Jeter. You don't ask him to change positions.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's the Expos. That's the Expos rabbit hole. that's like I don't know. I had a thought in the shower the other day, which is where I do most of my thinking, as you know. Like, we should just make this into an Expos podcast.
Well, I have a lot more Expo stuff to talk about today, so we're not even close to, like, it just might be Expos. I don't think we're going to get to the other stuff.
Okay, let's do it.
So the other game that was on this week was the David Cohn perfect game.
Oh, yeah.
And so you might recall, I think I said this to you on our last episode, I don't even remember the Expos ever playing a game in Yankee Stadium in my life.
I remember watching the game. I remember seeing the game, and when it was getting into the 6th and 7th inning, I was like, "Oh, he's pitching a perfect game," because you saw the Expos lineup that day.
It was brutal.
Gross. It was gross. Like there were like
other than Vlad.
It was barely
Vlad and Rondell.
It was barely a major league lineup, So as soon as he gets like one hitter out, then that's it. It's done.
So a few things I want to mention about that game. First of all, so Javier Vasquez pitched, and I think it was his rookie season, and he didn't have a good rookie season, and that game wasn't a good game. However, the Yankees won 6-0. They scored 5 in the second inning, and Vasquez ended up pitching, I think, 7 innings or 7+ innings. Like, he came back after that bad inning, and he pitched really well, actually. The other thing that was very strange, so again, remember, I think it was 99?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And it was a Sunday game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I remember it was a day game. It was like one of the games of the week.
But listen to this. It was a Sunday afternoon game. And normally, when you have a baseball series, you play the same team Friday, Saturday, Sunday. However, the day before, the Saturday, the Expos played Saturday night in Baltimore. And then they played Sunday afternoon in New York. It was very strange.
Weird. I wonder if, who knows? Yeah.
It wasn't just the Expos, like every team, because if the Expos were going from Baltimore to New York, then that means every single team was traveling between Saturday night and Sunday afternoon.
Right.
So I don't know I don't know if that was a thing that they were doing with the schedule that year, but it was very strange.
Very, very, that is weird.
So a couple other things about that game. Tim McCarver was the analyst.
Right, okay.
Not a huge fan of Tim McCarver, but...
Never was.
He mentioned, because, the Yankees were playing the Expos, he mentioned that he played on the Expos for a few months. I think in 1972 or something.
Oh, it had to be like the early days, right?
And so I looked it up, and sure enough, he did. I mean, he wouldn't lie about that. But I had no clue that Tim McCarver was ever on the Expos.
We were babies. Like, I don't know much about the Expos teams pre-1979, to be honest. I mean, I know the stars. I know Rusty Staub, Bob Bailey, Mike Marshall. Like, I know the names, but...
I just would have figured that I would have heard his name. I'm not saying I know anything because I was 2 years old at the time.
Right.
Or not even, but still, I figured I would have found out, or someone would have mentioned it between then and now.
Right, sure.
Now, the other thing about the 1999 season, because there was another game from 99 on recently.
Yeah.
And I think it was I don't know which game it was. And I couldn't figure out who the analyst was with Dave Van Horn. I couldn't figure it out because they never said his name and they never showed him. And so Dave at one point says his first name.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, was Gary Carter the analyst one year?
Oh my God. I think maybe he was for the TV broadcasts because I must have been watching the same game as you. And I was like, that sounds like Gary Carter.
And he said Gary, but he never said his full name.
I think it must be. I think it must be because don't forget, back in those days, I mean, everybody now lives in the days where like every one of your team's games is on TV, right? But back in those days, especially with the Expos, there was just a handful of TV games on TV during the year. Literally a handful, and we would mark them off on our calendar and make sure we were watching, So I think it's possible that, he could have been doing the TV broadcast. I really do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, that was just something I wanted to mention.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because I noticed that too. And I heard his voice. I'm like, that has to be Gary Carter. Like I recognized it, And it makes sense in the timeline. He's probably just recently retired, like type of thing.
But it's interesting because during that game, the one where I think Gary Carter was the analyst, they showed a list of, all-time Expos leaders. I don't know if it was home runs or RBIs.
Yeah.
And Carter was on the top 5 at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would think he would have said, oh, look, there I am at number 4 or something.
I mean,
but he didn't say that.
You never know.
So I'm done with baseball.
Oh, thank God. I love talking about it, but boy, oh boy, I wasn't expecting so much Expos talk.
The National Hockey League.
So we have to talk about hockey because a crazy thing happened this week.
Oh, okay.
I'm watching...
Considering there's no games.
Well, this is pretty crazy. I'm watching TV, and they're showing all these classic games, classic baseball, classic hockey, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm flipping around, and all of a sudden, I land on this game, and who do I see in the stands behind the net?
Yeah.
Me.
What?
I saw myself on television.
That is so awesome. Oh, that's the game. Okay. We texted about this and you told me I don't want to talk about it until the show because they were showing the 89 Stanley Cup Final.
Right? And it was game 3.
Canadiens Flames.
That's
the
right.
Flames won the series, right?
The Flames won the series, yes. But the Canadiens won game 3. So I must have told you the story a million times.
No, but then you texted me that you were at the game and I was like, you were at the game? Like what? And then I said, okay, you'll tell me now, like on the show, right?
Actually, you never responded to my text.
No, but like, how did you have tickets for a Stanley Cup Finals game? And then you also told me that you went to 2 games that series.
So it's 1989. The Canadiens are playing the Flames, and me and Costa actually bought tickets for Game 6.
You just bought them?
Standing room tickets. We bought them in advance. Like, I don't know, as soon as they went on sale, we bought them.
Standing room?
Yes.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure at the time you could buy... tickets in advance, standing room tickets in advance. You're not guaranteed of where you're going to stand, though. You have to get there really early, otherwise you're standing in a bad spot.
Right.
I'm pretty sure they don't even have standing room tickets anymore.
I'm not sure.
This is at the Old Forum, which, by the way, as I was watching the game, the Old Forum was ridiculous if you think about it, because if you recall, right behind the Canadiens bench, first of all, Ronald Corey used to sit right behind the bench.
The president of the team, yeah.
Not only that, there was no glass dividing the fans and the players. Like any fan could have easily just walked down the steps and been standing right behind the bench.
But that's not just the Old Forum. That's a lot of the old arenas in the 80s. Like now we have the netting and lots of protection
But like anyone, like you saw, like as I forget who the coach was. I think it was Pat Burns, right?
Yeah, it was. That
year in 89, and he's walking there and like literally like the fan could just tap him on the shoulder, like no problem.
Well, yeah. Well, Ronald Corey hugs him at the end of the game, and right, like.
Anyhow, so Costa and I had tickets for Game 6, but we didn't know if it was going to get to Game 6.
Right.
So Game 3, I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday night, and I was watching the game at home. And remember, Rick Wamsley was on the Flames, so I was a Flames fan,
Right.
even though he wasn't playing.
Right.
And I wanted to meet Rick Wamsley. I must have told you the story.
Yeah, okay.
So I wanted to meet him. And a friend of mine had told me that if you go to the Forum, you go to a certain exit or entrance where the players come in and out after the game. They have to leave the Forum to go onto their team bus. You can get autographs. Like, this was before they had smartphones, so I wasn't going to get a picture, right? I wasn't going to get a selfie. But maybe I was going to get an autograph. So anyway, so I'm watching the game, and I decided I was going to go and try to meet Rick Wamsley after the game. Mm-hmm. And so I left my house with about 10 minutes left in the third period or something. Mm-hmm. And I drove to the Forum. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to the game in the car.
Right.
And the Flames have a 1-goal lead late in the third period, very late in the third period. And so I finally find a parking spot near the old Forum, and I'm listening to the game, and I figure, okay, I'm just going to stay in the car until the next whistle. The next whistle happens to be the Canadiens tie up the game with like 40 seconds left.
Right.
So now I'm like freaking out because now the players aren't going to come out because it's going into overtime.
Right. And they actually went to double overtime.
Right. So anyway, I'm like, okay, well, I'm there, right? What am I going to do? I get out of the car. I'm like, I'm going to walk over to the Forum and see what I can do. And the funny thing is, I saw people that were leaving. Like, they left before the goal was scored.
Yeah. Okay, now I remember you told me this. So you got someone's ticket, right?
So they left before the goal was scored. They had no clue, right? Because it's before, they didn't have, you couldn't listen to the game on your phone. They had no idea what was going on.
Or even check your phone for the score.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, and I knew because I was listening in the car. So I go there, and just as I'm about to walk in, there's no security preventing people from coming in because no one's trying to come in.
Right.
I see this ticket stub on the ground.
You just pick it up.
I pick it up and I go to that seat. Like, I walk in like nobody's business.
God, talk about different times, right? Like, you just walk in, pick up a ticket, and go in.
Well, I mean, I had the ticket stub, so they couldn't they couldn't tell me no, right?
Right.
And so I go to the seat. It turns out it's not the first row behind the glass. It's the very second row. So at the Forum, again, there's one row right behind the glass. Then there's like an aisle where you could walk.
Yeah.
And then there's
the next.
So I go there, I sit there, and this is like, it's intermission, right? I'm thinking, this is great. I'm going to get to watch overtime for free. This is unbelievable. The usher comes over to me just as the first overtime is about to start, because she knows she hasn't seen me there all game. So she's like,
right,
this is not your seat. I'm kicking you out.
Yeah.
And then I show her my ticket.
What is she supposed to say?
She can't
so
kick
she had
me
to
out.
let you say.
She couldn't kick me out. It was great.
Right.
So I'm sitting there, and then this guy comes and sits next to me. I have no clue who he is. Turns out he's a reporter for the Calgary Herald.
Okay.
He's actually in Montreal because he's not doing a story. He's not a sports reporter. He's not doing a story on the game. He was in Montreal because you may recall that in 1989, there was a PCB spill in Saint-Basile-le-Grand.
There was, yeah.
And they wanted to send all of the chemicals to Calgary.
Uh-huh.
So that's why he was there doing a story on this.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
But he was also, since he was there, they're like, okay, do a story on the scalpers and how much they're charging for tickets.
Right, okay.
So he did. And then I'm sitting there, I'm telling him, yeah, I just walked into the game. I found this ticket on the ground, yada, yada, yada. So him and I chat, and then the first overtime ends and nobody scores, of course. So then he has to go and file his story because it's getting late.
Right.
And he comes back for the second overtime, and he sits down and he says to me, "You're in tomorrow's newspaper." And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, you told me the story about how you found the ticket. It's in tomorrow's newspaper. I have the newspaper right here. I can go get it if you want.
No,
sure enough,
amazing.
on the front page of the paper, not the sports section, the front page of the paper, there's a story about, how much the scalpers are charging. And in the story, he mentions me and how I found the ticket and I just walked in.
That's amazing.
So the game.
So is that the game where Brian Skrulin scored?
Not Brian Skrulin, Ryan Walter.
Ryan Walter.
Which is funny because I was watching the game 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago. Ryan Walter hardly got any ice time that game.
Yeah.
But yet he somehow scores the winning goal in the second overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And
so then you also went to Game 6 in the standing room, is that right?
I did also go to Game 6. Now, by the way, I did get to meet Rick Walmsley that game after the game, which is...
You did?
Well, after the game, I went down to where the visiting players leave. And so I saw all of them, but I only went to speak to Rick because I didn't care about the others.
That's amazing.
And so that was the first time I ever met him.
That's amazing.
Now, Game 6, I went to Game 6, but by then, between Game 3 and 6, this reporter that I met, we had become sort of friends. Like, we exchanged contact information. He had to go to St. Basile-le-Grand to interview a bunch of the local people, and he didn't speak a word of French. He wanted to know if I could go along with him and translate.
That's amazing. So you did?
I went with him. I mean, it was like...
Oh my God. How come I never heard this?
I don't know how you never heard this story. So I went with him, and then we went to visit a few different families, and I translated. And then, like, you know, as a thank you, he took me to Schwartz's.
Amazing. This is great.
It is. It was great. And we kept in touch, and that's why he sent me the actual newspaper when it came out.
Right.
The other thing was, though, for Game 6, I already had tickets, as you know. But what he did was he gave me his press pass from a previous game because he didn't need it anymore. And he's like, here's my press pass from like Game 3 or Game 4. See if you can get into the press box with this. Like, you're already in the building. See if you can get into the press box, right? Because they all look the same, right?
Did it work?
I did get into the press box. I was there for not very long because eventually somebody came up to me and said, "Who are you?" And they looked at my pass and it was legit.
Yeah.
What he had done was there's a part where they insert the date, like just someone writes it by hand.
Yeah.
And he cut that part off. So you couldn't see the date. So the pass looked legit.
Yeah.
So the person who kicked me out of the press box, they weren't sure if they could kick me out because I had a pass.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to go hang out with Costa anyway, so I didn't stay there very long. But I did get into the press box for a few minutes.
Wild. Josh, this is like a whole other bunch of stuff I never even knew. Like,
it's a crazy long story.
I'm sure you've told me that story before about the ticket on the ground and the Rick Walmsley, and like it's ringing a bell in my mind, you know.
So anyway, I recorded the game that I watched on Wednesday night or whatever it was.
Well, Game 6 is the Flames won the cup.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, that's the first time a team ever won the cup on the Canadiens' ice, no?
I think you might be right.
Time.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah.
And was it the last time? Was it the last time that two Canadian teams were in the finals?
It has to be, no?
Well, yeah, I think so.
It has to be. Because it has to be.
Well, 93 is the last time a Canadian team won the cup, right?
Right. So then it's can only be between 83 and 89, and I don't think there's any, you know. The sad thing about the Canadiens, the 89 Canadiens, is that like the 93 Canadiens won the cup and the 86 Canadiens won the cup, right? But the 89 team was the best team. Like I always think that was actually the best team of all of them, and they ran into the Flames and couldn't figure out how to sort of stop Al McInnes, like, basically.
You're right about the Canadiens. That roster, like, just think about the 6 guys on defense. I think I can remember Rick Green, Craig Ludwig, Larry Robinson, Eric Desjardins, and Chris Chelios, who I think Chelios was a Norris nominee that year. Norris Trophy nominee. Like, that's a sick blue line.
I know.
And I think I think I left one out, actually.
But it's that they had a bunch of young forwards that like came into their own, you know, like Richer was becoming a star and Claude Lemieux was established, and like they were just so good. I don't know.
Bobby Smith was still on that team.
Yeah, I love Bobby Smith. Very underrated player.
By the way, so Ryan Walter scores the winning goal. We're going to go down another rabbit hole here.
Here we go.
You know how the Canadiens acquired Ryan Walter. I don't know if you remember this trade.
Yeah. It was the big trade for, what's his name? Rod Langway.
Yeah, so it was actually a very bad trade for the Canadiens.
Well, I know. The GM got fired because of it. No?
So they acquired Ryan Walter and Rick Green, and they gave up Rod Langway, Craig Laughlin, Doug Jarvis, and a fourth player whose name escapes me at the moment. Brian Engblom.
Yeah.
That's not a good trade for the Canadiens.
No, of course not. But when you think about it, Ryan Walter did play many years for the Canadiens. So did Rick Green, right?
I think Rick Green retired right after that season.
It's not like they had guys that were busts. Like, it's just that they gave up Langway, who won the Norris, and and Lachlan, who was like a 20 goal scorer several times for the Capitals, and like I don't know.
Like if it was a 2-for-2 deal, it would have been a fair trade. I don't know why the Canadians had to throw in 2 extra guys.
Remember when they made that trade? It was like all over the newspaper, like all over the press here, like how bad it was, right?
I think the reason they made the trade was because Langway wanted to get out of there. Like he didn't want to be a Canadian.
Well, Langway always played in the shadow of the other defensemen at the time in the late 70s, right? And he always felt like he didn't get sort of the ice time and credit he deserved, so he wanted to be a star sort of somewhere else. But I mean, he ended up going to Washington, which wasn't like exactly a, big hockey market.
No, it wasn't. Anyhow,
wow,
just very interesting.
Wow, so that's like a lot of stuff to digest right there. Canadians and Expos. I love it. That's that's all I want to talk about, really.
If I know this we're going very long here, but I have to mention the 1993 season.
Yeah, sure.
So the Canadians won the cup, obviously. We know that, and they beat the Kings. What I didn't realize until this week, the Kings, Gretzky was on the team, like the best hockey player of all time. I'm comfortable saying that, by the way.
Well, I've defended that position often. Yeah.
So, and he's playing in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But he's Canadian. Now, I don't know if you realize the Kings, they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals that year. They played 4 different teams that year.
Right.
They played Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver. They played 4 Canadian teams.
Amazing.
I don't know that that's ever happened.
I don't. Could not have happened. I doubt it could have happened unless.
I mean, how many?
No, it's impossible.
How many? First of all, that means 4 Canadian teams made the playoffs. First of all. Which that
doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen very often.
I'm thinking about the other Oilers teams, and they could have beaten Vancouver and Calgary to get out of the division, but very doubtful that they would have ever had to play Toronto. Like at that time, the Norris division, right? Like that was the only Canadian team in the Norris division. So like, no, it's impossible. Yeah.
So I just found that's interesting as well.
Amazing. I watched a little bit of. They showed the Marty McSorley game. The
illegal stick.
The legal stick game. I watched it. It's great. But when you listen, I told you, we talked about this like last year or the year before. There's a podcast on the Hockey Night in Canada podcast or no, which is the podcast? It's an which is the podcast? Maybe it's Hockey Night in Canada.
31 Thoughts?
31 Thoughts. And at one point they had the whole like rehash of the stick measuring incident, and the behind the scenes of that is when you watch the game now, like when I watched it on TV I was like, oh yeah, but like when you listen to that podcast and hear all the behind the scenes stuff, it's classic because you hear Kerry Fraser and he's basically saying like, as soon as they put that stick in my hand, I knew it was illegal, like just looking at it, and he said like Barry Melrose was screaming at him. He was so mad, and he went to him. He's like, "What do you want me to do? Look at this thing." It
wasn't even close.
It's not even close. And everybody knew it, and McSorley knew it. They all knew it. They all knew it the minute it happened.
I don't know if you saw. There was this thing where on Sportsnet they were showing that game, and Ron McLean and Wayne Gretzky were talking to each other while they were watching the game.
I saw the after. They had Kirk Muller talking to Gretzky.
Right. Yeah, so that was interesting. Yeah. Gretzky has a lot of interesting things to say about that game, about that whole season.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
He felt that one of the big reasons the Canadians won that series was because of Mike Keane.
Really? Well, Mike Keane is a severely underrated player in the history of the Habs. I mean, like, they traded him in the Patrick Waugh trade, and he was the captain. Like, that's all you need to sort of know.
Speaking of brutal trades.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that Gretzky would say that. Like, I always felt like Keane was a very useful NHL player.
I think when they put Keane in the lineup, they Dennis Savard was a healthy scratch, and that was a big deal. And that was a big deal at the time, right?
I don't know if Savard was a healthy scratch, but he was hurt or wasn't really able to really play. Yeah, that was a big deal because Savard was basically, they were playing like handicapped by having Savard play.
Right. But you couldn't bench Savard, right? Like.
Right.
Anyway.
All right, maybe we need to like sort of wrap things up, I guess. We really went long on these
I know. We could probably do a second episode today.
I do have a TV thing that I need to talk about.
Okay.
I really need to talk about.
Well, I have TV on my list, so let's do that.
TV?
So did you finish Ozark?
I did finish Ozark. As I mentioned, too many people die in that show.
Right. So like, I don't want to do spoilers. I mean, it's still a fresh show. So
Well,
maybe
you can say anything you want now because I've seen it.
I know, but like if anybody hasn't seen Ozark season 3,
Well, turn your volume down now.
Like fast forward 30 seconds or a minute. Like the ending is shocking, no?
I was not expecting that.
It's just shocking, right? It's absolutely shocking. Like, so there has to be a season 4 now, I guess. Like there has to be. Otherwise, what's the point of ending it that way, you know?
I hope, but I mean, I don't see like, you remember at the end of season 2, I think it was?
Yeah.
He had a plan to get out of there.
Yeah, he did. They had a plane that was going to meet them and everything. Now I don't know what he could do.
So now, if they didn't do it, like that was their only window of opportunity to get out.
Yeah.
Now I don't see how they're going to get out.
But the only thing that I feel is like he's in a really good position in a sense. I mean, obviously he's not in a good position, but like he sort of proved to his boss that like how valuable he is. Like he's like the only guy that could do what he's doing, you know? Like it's not like they could just find another guy that knows how to do what he's doing.
I get that,
so,
but you still need
yeah.
to explain a few things to me, actually.
Okay.
Can I say what happened in the last episode?
Sure.
Like, why did they kill her?
I don't know. I don't think he needed to kill her. I think he might have figured out that like she was playing both sides or she wasn't being honest with him. You know what I mean? Like if anything, Jason Bateman proved to I don't even know the guy's name, the Mexican drug lord, whatever his name is, proved to him that he was loyal to him, right? Like he proved to him like, I'm going to work for you. I'm on your side. We're going to do this together. Everything we're doing. And also Jason Bateman's wife too. Like they prove that they're on his side. Whereas the lawyer, I forget her name now also, she was trying to make Helen was trying to make Jason Bateman look bad and she was playing games. And I basically think like he's like, he had enough of it, you know? Like,
well, she forged his signature on that confession.
Exactly. They didn't even get to that, you know, like they never even showed that anyways.
The other thing I don't understand.
Yeah.
And again, this is my naivete, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a show, Josh. I mean, it's like, you know.
No, but still, the FBI, I forget the name of the agent, Agent Miller?
Yeah, the pregnant
woman.
Yeah.
So she knows exactly what he's doing. Like they talk about it. They talk about it in his office. Like it's not.
But
he doesn't
can't prove it.
He doesn't even hide the fact. Like they talk about it. She knows exactly what he's doing. She's the one who flagged that account because she knew that he was in Mexico and she knew that he was going to be able to get out of it. Like
right. She saved him.
So if she knows, why don't they arrest him?
I guess that they just don't have enough like hard proof. You know, I don't know. It's you're right. I don't know.
Anyway,
I often thought about that, but I mean, who knows? I mean, I guess the end goal is not to get Jason Bateman; it's to get the Mexican guy, or whoever he's, you know. But you know,
yeah.
So something weird happened this week, and I'm going to test your memory. And I researched something that shocked me. So there's nothing on TV, as you know. I'm sick of Netflix. The stuff that they show you on like the Netflix top 10 is garbage. Like it's garbage. Like I don't believe people are watching this stuff. Like Tiger King. Like
well, haven't you watched all that stuff?
No, I watched 2 episodes and said I can't finish this. It sucks. And then there's other shows that are on the Netflix top 10, like Love is Blind. These kind of reality shows. Like these look like garbage.
Too hot to handle.
Too hot to handle. We watched this movie the other night, Extraction. It's with Chris Hemsworth, you know, the guy that plays Thor. It's absolute garbage, you know, like, and it's number 4 in Canada. I'm like, what is this? Anyway, so all that to say is I went on CTV Throwback and I started to watch Dawson's Creek.
Well, you haven't missed an episode of that show, I thought.
No, but I mean, it's like 20 years old, right? And okay, so I'm watching episode 1 of Dawson's Creek. I've watched 2 episodes so far. That's it. You know, and the show starts and the theme song comes on and it's not the song that I expected. Right? Do you remember what the theme song is for Dawson's Creek?
I think I do.
Yeah. Paula Cole, I Don't Want to Wait.
Yeah, that's right? What I thought. Yeah.
I don't want to wait for our lives to be over. I want to know right now, what will it be?
Everybody in the world knows that that's the theme song of Dawson's Creek. Like, that's it. It's part of the show. It's part of the sort of lore. It's part of, like, the whole feel of the show. Like, it's the mythology of Dawson's Creek. Part of it is Paula Cole, I Don't Want to Wait.
You know who would know, by the way. You know who would know the answer to this.
No. I'm going to explain it to you because I researched it.
Okay.
So when you watch it now, when I watched it, it's not the song. There's another song, and I had to look up the name of the song. It's called Run Like Mad, and it's by Jan Arden. Now, I just picked any random episode later in the season to see like what theme song. I was thinking maybe in season 1 it was a different song, right? Maybe I'm misremembering. No, it's the same song. I go to season 2, same song. I go to season 3, same song. Like, I'm like, what is going on here? So sure enough, I look it up. In all the streaming and actual DVDs at the time, like if you go back maybe 10 years when DVDs were released, and in all the streaming services, as soon as it got released out into streaming services, Sony was too cheap to license the song by Paula Cole, so they replaced it with a song that they already owned the rights to, which was this Jan Arden song.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is absolute madness. Don't you think? It's madness. I can't even wrap my head around it. Like, I'm like, man, it's part of the show. Like, and then they replaced it with this other song, which is actually a pretty good song, but just really, really weird. So anyways, I'm going to start watching Dawson's Creek.
That's crazy though, because usually when these like these TV companies or movie companies, when they use real songs in their shows or in movies, like they get these they get the rights to, like, they don't have to buy the rights to one song at a time. They get the rights to like a whole library of songs.
But the thing is, I read a bunch of articles, and what happened in this case is that song already existed when Dawson's Creek came out. It was a song on the charts. It wasn't made for the show. Mm-hmm. And the executive said, oh, we like that show. Let's get it as the theme song. So that's what they did. But the original theme song was going to be this Jan Arden song, and then they replaced it. So they bought the rights to use the Paula Cole song, but they bought it not in perpetuity to be used anywhere in the universe. They bought the rights for when it's broadcast on the air. Mm-hmm. And then what ended up happening, DVDs became a thing and streaming became a thing, and they don't own the rights for that version of the show. And they were basically too cheap to pay for it.
That's crazy. That's a crazy story.
Yeah, it is crazy. And you can look it up. There's a billion articles that'll explain the ins and outs of why it happened and everything. So before we sign off, remember, you can listen and subscribe to new and archived episodes of the Skip and Josh podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and of course, Spotify. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. We would love to hear from you via email, skipandjoshshow@gmail.com, via Twitter @skipandjosh, or by liking and following our Facebook page. As always, you can get all the links to everything I just talked about on our website, skipandjosh.com.
We leave you with this.
I don't have anything to end the show with, so I hope you do.
I have one thing.
Okay, sure, go for it.
So have you seen this commercial on ABC for this show that's starting this month, actually? It's called Holy Moly 2.
No, I have not.
Okay, first of all, the fact that there's Holy Moly 2 means there was Holy Moly 1.
Right, which I never heard of either.
But if you see this commercial, I predict this is the type of show that you and your wife will watch.
What is it about?
It's kind of like Battle of the Network Stars. Is the only way
Why would I watch that?
It's the only way I can describe it. Because don't you and your wife watch that show where you got to do this whole crazy obstacle course? What's that show called?
The Amazing Race?
No. It's not The Amazing.
Oh, Wipeout.
No. This is like Wipeout. Holy moly, looks like Wipeout to me. But what's that show that you and your wife watch?
Oh, American Ninja Warrior.
That, yes. So this reminds me of that, except the one you watch is a serious one. Like, they actually have to train for it. This one is a joke because they do have to go through an obstacle course. But like one of the obstacles I saw in the commercial, there's a guy like on a mini putt course, and he has to putt the ball into the hole, which actually it looks quite simple. But what he doesn't realize is just after he hits the ball, this fire-breathing dragon comes out and burns the ball.
That's so stupid. So what's going to happen now on a lot of networks and streaming services too is they've run out of shows, right? They've run out of stuff. So they are going to put anything on the air that they've got in their vault. A pilot was made and 3 episodes or 4 episodes of Holy Moly were made. They decided at the time, this show is garbage, we're not going to use it. And now they're desperate, so they're like, some head of ABC is like, hey, remember that show Holy Moly? Let's pop that on the air. We got nothing else to show. We're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel.
100%.
All right, Josh. Wow, this episode was like mentally exhausting of that Expos and Canadians rabbit holes.
It was. I didn't expect it to be like that, but you never know what's going to happen.
So maybe we need to apologize to the Toronto listeners since it was so Montreal focused.
Whatever. They'll deal with it.
They'll deal with it. They will.
The Leafs haven't won a playoff round since who knows when. But, what else are we going to talk about?
Exactly. All right, so I guess until next week.
Until next week.